Okay, so here we go again. We're going to discuss today moving from Dorico to Cubase, and there's been some things that I've learned over the past week and a half that actually make this quite less cumbersome and really speed up the process, plus get you quickly into the ballpark for creating a good mock-up. So there's about 3 or 4 really key important things that I have learned. One of them is the fact that how you name your files will allow you to use a really powerful tool in Cubase, which is copying to tracks of the same name, those kind of things. That Cubase actually has some function that will allow you to do this. And so the more you stay consistent with naming your file names as your instrument track names, the better. And this depends kind of on the arrangement. It just depends. If you have a symphonic piece with 4 horn parts, of course, there's going to be a little discontinuity there. Same thing with maybe your trombone parts, whether you have 2 or 3 and then a bass trombone, or only 2 tenor trombones and a bass trombone, all of that. But that is to say that most of the time, if you are really consistent with naming your tracks, it will help. And we start by naming in the setup in Dorico, naming your instrument parts, because these are what's going to be tracks later on. These are what is going to become the tracks in Cubase. And furthermore, if you go the route of breaking up, instruments into trumpet long, trumpet short, trumpet effects, or that type of thing, this will at least give you a beginning platform. So the very first thing I want to do is I'm going to go through here and I'm going to make these a little bit consistent. So as I noticed when I opened this particular piece, and once again, I'm dealing with pieces that I have created in the past, in Finale, brought them into Dorico, and then now moving them for mock-ups into Cubase. So this might vary depending on your process. But for one thing, I know that what I've been naming things over in Cubase for my template, I'm just going to name them the flutes, okay? And I have been having piccolo parts as well. So we've got the piccolo part, flutes, and then, so this, for instance, says oboes 1 and 2, but we're just going to go with oboe. All right. And same thing here. We're just going to go with clarinet 1. I'm going to leave off the B flat. And then this says clarinet 2 and 3. So just for sake when I bring it in so I know what's going on, I'm still going to leave this 2 and 3, but we'll address that later. Bass clarinet is fine. Bassoons, and you can see that I keep doing that. So we'll just say bassoon, and also this is out of order, so I'm going to bring this back into line with some score order. That was some issues too. Alto saxophone is going to now become just alto saxophone. Tenor saxophone, baritone saxophone. So, in your mock-up, you probably are going to put like all 3 trumpet parts in one track, maybe. Depends on the song and the arrangement. But if they're playing, kind of chordal material or that kind of thing, and same, kind of like homogeneous rhythm, but just different notes, you may take that approach. So those things do impact this. However, this is definitely a good start, is just to make sure that you're naming them the same thing. So trumpet 1, and I just going to make sure that I'm doing this the way that I remember. So I'm going to go ahead and open my Cubase here, and let me get this down out of here. We'll see Cubase, and I'm going to open this file template that I've been using down here, the symphonic band template, and I'm going to just sure. This way I can just kind of really double check, make sure that I am keeping things consistent. Um, yeah, I can see as it loads already that I'm on track. So here we have my instrument lists, and I've got the clarinets, the saxophones, the trumpets, the horns, and trombones all split off. But you can see that my naming policy here is the instrument plus their instrument number, clarinet 1, clarinet 2, so on and so forth. So just wanted to make sure that we're on track. So come down here and just continue this. So same thing here. I'm going to call this trumpets 2 and 3, just so I know that I'm working with parts that way. And this is a little something. So French horns, of course, if they're written in the score in a more traditional sense, you're going to have French horns 1 and 3 on a part, and 2 and 4. And so you'll have to address this. Up to this point, I have not used that convention, but this is an older piece that I wrote earlier, and I've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. In the modern era, it just helps a little bit, partly because I have not written as much symphonic band music, but more concert band music with maybe only 2 French horn parts, and partly because, just for clarity of part reading. And I'm sure there's a whole discussion about that. And we've got our baritone, tuba, timpani. And then with the percussion, we're going to wait until we get into Cubase to split the percussion parts apart. But one thing that I would suggest to you to do when you get into Cubase, especially if you're operating off something you've already written, and it's in print first, it's engraved first, is my next step I will do is I'm going to go over here to print, and I'm going to print those percussion parts so that I'm not having to remember from memory what these instruments are, snare, bass, and those kind of things. And so these aren't necessarily marked all that well, but at least I can tell this is snare and that's bass, so that when I'm working on those things later, it goes a little quicker. So I'm going to print this. I'm going to make sure that my double-sided is off. And so I'm going to print both of these parts, and I'm sure this is just a crash cymbal. This is a basic, old-time march, so it's just got really 3 parts in the percussion, in the drums there. All right. And I will save that for later. Okay. So now here's the next interesting thing that I learned. I'm going to save this. I'm going to export this file as a MIDI file. I'm going to export this file that I have as a MIDI file. And I was at first going through the process of really getting the playback in Dorico just right. And you can still do that, and there's some benefit to doing that. But for my process in this project, I'm actually not concerned with that. So I'm just going to I'm going to export this as a MIDI file. I'm going to tell it where I want it to export for my project's organizational state. I'm going to go to the Circus March, and I'm going to choose this folder here. Okay. So my MIDI file is now in that folder. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close Dorico, and I'm going to open Cubase, and I'm going to start a new import from MIDI file. Okay, and this is the interesting thing. I found this on YouTube from a gentleman who suggested this, and I thought it was a good idea. And I've been using it to really some great effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import now my MIDI file, and then when I import this MIDI file and I make this new Cubase file, I'm going to create just a generic MIDI file. Okay, so this is what I've got here, just your this is all the MIDI data. So rather than go through here and redo all this and redo all this, of course, the point is we're using templates. We're using things that are already set up for us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and I'm going to name it the name of my file, which is Circus March. And then I'm going to name it Staged. Okay, so this is a kind of a fallback file. That's a staging file, and I show you some of the powerful things in Cubase in just a minute and how it works well with getting these MIDI tracks into your template. And if there's anybody out there that has a quicker and better way, I'd love to hear it. But this is what I've been working with and researching for the past week or so. And this seems to work rather well once I kind of figured out my workflow. So I've got this thing named Stage. I'm going to put it here and make sure that's in my DAW sessions. And I'm going to put it over here. I think I'll leave it right here. That's what I've been doing. And then so it's named Circus March Staged. So then I'm going to go ahead and close that file. I don't need it right now. And then I'm going to create a new symphonic band. I'm going to create a new file with my template. Okay. And so I'm going to name this one, this is the name of my project, which in this case is Circus March. As we wait for it to kind of populate. So now I have a file in which all my instruments that I typically use for band are here and set up. And all the routing is set up, so on and so forth. And so I've got a really quick way now to get what I want exactly where I want it. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to save this. And I'm going to name it Circus March, just the name, because this is now the final version that I'm going to be working with. Okay, so Cubase has a really neat feature where you're just going to come up under here and you're going to import, tracks from project. Okay, and the beautiful thing about importing tracks from project is that you've got quite a bit of flexibility ahead of time in what to bring into your template and allowing you to really get it in the place you need rather quickly. The next step I'm going to explore is getting this directly into my instrument tracks, but I like to put them all as a MIDI at the bottom of the file that I'm bringing them into. And we can see, so I'm going to definitely say the tempo and the signature track, you're going to want those probably most of the time, bringing them in. Then I'm going to do this piccolo track, and the nice thing is I can just already have in my file MIDI tracks named these conventions. Okay, so there is a way in which you can bring them in and then tell the file to copy the track to names of similar names, but this is also just as quick. I just kind of go through here and I pick these things, and you can just go down here, and I'm just going to be, and there might even be a quicker way to do this, but I find this rather, that's bassoons, sorry. I find this rather quick, doesn't take long at all, and then it works really well on the back end of things. And here you can also make your choices about where you're going to, how you're going to handle things like this. So for right now, I'm going to put these second and third clarinet part into clarinet 2. We'll probably be combining those tracks later on. And then we just continue to do this. There might even be a button you can press to get this to do automatically, but I just like looking at it just to make sure, because there's always seems to be one or two differences in the setup of the file. Some of these things I wrote over different years, some of these things are brand new and I've changed my process, or I may have a different situation. I may not have quite the band that I had, or maybe I have a better band now, and so these are things that I can make this decision in this list going forward. It's really, really very, very helpful. And it's Pretty intuitive once you get it in here. It makes it a pretty cool process. Okay, so we've got bass drum D, which is the duplicate. Somehow that's stuck in there. And then I'm named like baritone euphonium, so I've switched over to that. Tubas, and like you may have in Dorico or other notation file, you might have a baritone and treble clef, and then a euphonium bass clef. This allows you to make decisions about how you're going to handle things like that. Okay, so I'm just going to put this on the timpani, and then percussion 1 and 2. I'm just going to percussion 1, and then percussion 2. I know that percussion 2 is actually the crash cymbals and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell it to make a new track in this case, and then I'm ignoring the rack instruments they don't have. Now over here we have other choices, very customizable how you're going to do this. You can, and once again, you can do the select matching and all that stuff up here, but I bypassed this. So events and parts, I want to take all the MIDI data into Cubase. Now, for instance, if I wanted to strip off maybe some MIDI things, we can filter those things out. But right now, we're going to replace all the events and parts in the destination, and then you could set a range, but I just going to say where cursor position is. You can do absolute position, relative position. I've had a little trouble with those two kind of putting things at the end. I'm just going to do cursor position, and the cursor you can see is here at the beginning of the piece. Okay, and then this button needs to be checked, channel and inspector settings. It does weird things, well, at least it did for me if you don't. Anyway, you can see that it gives you a bunch of information. And then import position for new tracks, bottom of track list, below selected track, right? And so this is where you tell it where you want it to go, okay? And then you just hit OK. And then what happens is it brings all of these parts into your folder. Now you can't see them right now because I had the folder closed, but now here I have my parts and all of that in. I'm going to turn off this lane. Right. Whoop. I keep adding a lane. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to fold this up. Right. So now I've got parts into here, and it's kind of all ready to go. Now, one thing I have noticed is that sometimes your time signature comes in a little weird, and so you'll have to address that and double check and make sure and kind of really play with some things. So like for the instance, that's left over. Same thing with tempo. This I don't think this song really has much of a tempo change from the very beginning, and so you can see that it kind of brought everything in. Okay, now if I were to play this now, it's not going to sound like much. It's pretty rough, and sometimes it's not even playing. So now my next step is I'm just going to move this MIDI data into the tracks that have my instruments here. You can see them set up on the side. I'm going to move that into. So third really cool thing about doing this. So you'll want to select the track. So this is the piccolo track. You'll do your regular kind of command and copy stuff. So I'll just command C for copy. Then I'm going to move up here to the piccolo channel track up here, and I'm just going to hit Option V, and that's it's going to place it at its original place at origin. That's what it's called, place at origin. That's the term you're looking for. And when you copy and place at origin, it's going to put the music exactly where it should go in relationship to the others. And this might matter. For example, you see the tenor saxophone parts. When it brings the MIDI in, sometimes it brings it in these little chunks. Now, another way to handle this is you can always go up here to the glue, and you can always glue this to the one in front of it, and then make sure that you drag the origin point at the beginning to the beginning, and then you can just bring stuff to the beginning of the piece. But what's really handy is place at origin. Another thing that is kind of handy is you can then take multiple parts at a time. Say I want to do flutes, oboes, and bassoons, because I can do that up there. Command C, copy that, come up here to flute, and then hit Option V, and now you can see that it's put those three parts where it should be. So if I expand the clarinets, I can also do this now with the clarinets. Just a couple of things that make things a little quicker, and put that there, and Option V, and so then I'm going to get my two clarinet parts. I can do the same thing. Now I'm going to just grab my bass clarinet part by itself, and then come up here to bass clarinet, because it's got a little bit of a gap. It makes more sense to do it that way. And then I'm going to grab all the saxophone parts, and I'm just holding down Shift to get these saxophone parts. Command C, come up here to the saxophones, expand it, go to the alto saxophone, Option V. Okay, and so that's very, very quick and handy way of doing it. Same thing with the French horns. And really, this seems a little bit labor intensive, but it's really a lot less than recreating all of your instruments and trying to remember how to do that, because I will show you in just a minute. Once you bring these in, now you can go from 0 to hero really quickly, because you can get playing and get right to making things and sound more realistic, and making your adjustments, and that sort of thing. So let me just grab, so this one has just two trombone parts here, it looks like, maybe. There's the bass trombones. It's all separated out, but that's okay. Command C, bring it up to trombones here. Trombone 1, Option V. Now, you might be wondering why it's creating two lines. That's because I have put these in a folder. So when you put something in the folder, at the sub level, it makes a little line at the top level there. That's what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and glue my baritone. But either way, I'm still going to use the Command C and then the Option V to make sure that it's pasted at origin, and do that way. And so my euphonium, my baritone part, and then I'm going to come down and grab my bass trombone, and bass trombone. And I'm sure that this is not the best way to do a video on YouTube. You're supposed to be probably do some sort of montage of me doing this, but one of the things that frustrates me with things on YouTube is they don't go through all the steps sometimes, and you're wondering about a step in the gap, or you don't understand or see the process. So yes, we've got all these. Now for percussion 1 and 2, it's kind of like a general MIDI bass and snare. I'm going to, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to just copy this, and I'm going to put this up here in just, say, my bass drum. I'm going to pick my bass drum, and I'm going to put that there. Later on, I'm going to split this out using the note editor, and I'll make a separate video about this. So to open up the editor, you Option Command E, and to close it is the quick key. All right. So, and then we've got this. Now, another thing you can do rather than glue, if you don't want to glue, you can drag all of these, hit Command C, then come up here to wherever you're going to put this. So this is probably going to be the crash symbol. So we're going to go ahead and put it there, and control, and then it pastes it or origin, which means it keeps the spread all out. Okay. So, but I like, just for later on when I'm swinging down the path, trying to select all the notes, having it all glued together is just better. And these days with processing times on processors and RAM, it doesn't really cause a problem. Now, what I can do now that I've got this done, I just come over here to my Wins and Original MIDI, and I mute it. And so then it mutes the entire folder. So that's the benefit of having that. Yep. And I do the same thing with my original percussion, just so it won't play and do weird things. Now, one thing that I have noticed is occasionally coming from another DAW or maybe from Dorico, you can see that like key switch events have made their way into my part. Now, I'm going to investigate how to get rid of those just altogether, but for right now, I'm just selecting these and then deleting these because sometimes it does cause weird playback things. And so I'm having to go through and just check some of them. Some of them it brings in and some of them doesn't. I'm sure it's from when I had something going on in Dorico with dynamics and all of those kind of things, and also the playback techniques. So that might be something you want to even skip in Dorico if you're going to do this process, because now I've got an extra step that I don't really like to do. But anyway, that is the process, and then you can see this gives you kind of a rough thing. Okay, so now at least I have a basic beginning instrumental structure, and lots of work to do, of course, in making that sound more realistic, and reverb and dynamics and balance and all of that. We got to get the percussion in, which isn't going right now, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's the process that I found to be the most efficient and quick to bring in things that are already in print from Dorico and any notation software that'll export a MIDI, really. So remember the staging file, and then use the tracks, import the tracks up under edit, file import, audio tracks from project is what you're looking for, and that's a real handy way to do it. Thank you for watching.